Venerable attendees, the next agenda, we will listen to the introduction to conference term by the Chair of Conference, Professor Dr. Nurhaidi Hasan. The screen is yours.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Welcome to the annual International Conference on Islamic Studies in Surakarta 2021. This 20th Aicis is characterized by exceptional timelines and urgency. The spread of the coronavirus across the globe did not spare the Muslim world, where it posed a challenge for Muslims that had to find ways in dealing with the virus crisis. The question of how Muslims should respond to the pandemic became a public issue, igniting debates that have been widely disseminated by electronic means, particularly on today's social media. Provoked by some groups that initially opted for ignoring or downplaying the threat of the virus, the role of Muslim communities in anticipating the impact of the pandemic became a topic in the debates. Many of them were inspired to rethink and they contextualized their religious beliefs and practices to adjust to the changing context. This challenge takes more urgency for Indonesia, as this largest populous Muslim country in the world has been confronting the conservative turn as a result of the rise of Islamic radicalism after Suharto. Amid mounting demand for reform and democratization, various militants and radical organizations were on the rise to call for the implementation of the Sharia and the establishment of an Islamic state. This totalitarian ideal was pursued not only through militant campaigns and violent action, but also through a strategy to shape the narratives of confrontation with the others. Supported by Muslim civil society organizations led by the Nahdlatul Ulama and the Muhammadiyah, the government responded to the challenge by strengthening religious moderation. Within this context, the irreplaceable of Pancasila as the state ideology, whose principles are not seen as contradicting to Islam, is emphasized. Pancasila features both high levels of social trust, civic mindedness, citizenship, mutual cooperation and responsibility, and respect for human rights, gender equality, and humanity, which are also believed to be the very principles of Islam. Beyond the classical theoretical debates on the place of religion in public life, this conference addressed the factors and modalities that may contribute to the strengthening of Islam rules in public reason and public deliberation. This is related to the fundamental questions pertaining to the mechanism available to maintain common consensus among competing elements of the nation that involves in the debates. As the consequence of increased diversity within and between religious groups, it is more difficult for societies to manage pluralism and multiculturalism, especially with the decline of the power and membership of what were mainline religious groups. To tackle this problem, this conference explores the extent to which we can learn from Islamic legal tradition, especially fiqh, believed to prioritize public interest, maslahah, that resolve around the issue of protecting the rights for life, reproduction, intellectuality, property, and freedom of religion over any other things. Within this context, there is a need to reactualize the fiqh. The notion of fiqh actualization was actually first introduced by the then Minister of Religious Affairs, Munawir Sazali, some 30 years ago. But today, we try to rethink about this concept and contextualize it directly with relevant issues of public policy. In this 4 days conference, hundreds of scholars, researchers, and students from around the world present their papers on relevant topics. This is the forum for us to share our new ideas, new perspective, and latest research findings. This is also the forum for us to learn each other and broaden our knowledge and horizon on Islam. Selamat mengikuti Aicis ke-20. Please enjoy it. Thank you very much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 20th Annual International Conference on Islamic Studies. This year, this conference is held in Surakarta, and the theme of our conference is Islam in a Changing Global Context, Rethinking Fiqh, Reactualization, and Public Policy. For the first session this morning, we're going to have a keynote speech to be delivered by Professor Khalid Masood and Professor Abdul Nasser. As we know that there are at least 4 important issues, global issues, that should be discussed and explored in the context of rethinking fiqh, reactualization, and public policy in this globalization era. The first one is that since the first half of the 20th century, most of the Muslim majority countries successfully freed themselves from the colonial power. And at that period, they faced a new challenge, namely the new institution called the nation state. Muslim thinkers and intellectuals should think of how Islamic law can be relevant to these new institutions. And the discussion also come around the issues of human rights and democracy. And later on, the world also experienced a demographic change, especially because many of Muslims migrated to the non-Muslim majority countries, and they became the minority citizen in those countries. As Muslims, they want to practice Islam in their daily life. They want to follow Islamic values and Islamic law. So the question for them is how to follow Islamic values and Islamic law within the non-Muslim majority countries. Muslim intellectuals then discussed what is called minority fiqh or fiqh al-aqalliyat. The third context is the social media, especially the new media, which creates a new public sphere or virtual public sphere for all people in the world. Some scholars say that we are living in a global village. And in this context, Muslims interact each other easily from the platform of the social media. And through this platform, we also encounter different opinions, different fatwas on religious issues. Therefore, we cannot avoid contesting discourses and authorities. So the question of religious authority in the new virtual public sphere is also a very important issue. And the last one, I think, the global context of the reactualization of fiqh is the present pandemic COVID-19 crisis. This crisis actually a health crisis that led to economic and psychological crisis. But at the same time, Muslims should adapt to the new situations. How do they practice religious obligations and rituals within the limitations of the pandemic COVID-19 that happened in this world? So Muslims intellectuals should explore and think about the new provision of Islamic law to adapt to these new situations. Now today we have two important speakers. The first speaker is from Pakistan, Professor Khalid Masood. He is actually my former professor when I was in Leiden. He was the director of the International Institute for the Study of Islam in the Modern World around 2001 to 2004. And Professor Khalid Masood is also a former student of Fazlur Rahman. Yeah, I think we in Indonesia are quite familiar with Fazlur Rahman's works and ideas. And Khalid Masood is actually a close student to the late Professor Fazlur Rahman. So we are lucky today to have him, and I hope we can learn a lot from his presentations. And I want to know whether he is now in contact with us. Hello, Professor Khalid Masood. Hello. Alhamdulillah. Yeah. Nice to meet you again. Can you hear me? Yeah, your voice is not heard here.
Okay, now, can you hear me?
Yeah, now it's heard. Alhamdulillah bil khair. Yeah, I think without further ado, it is time for you to present your paper. Please welcome
Okay.
Professor Khalid Masood.
Thank you very much. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. I thank the organizing committee, Islamic University Suraga, and the of Religious Affairs and the of the Republic of Asia. There is an echo. Okay, I'll read it. Acknowledge the wisdom of the organization in selecting for this conference the theme of Islam in a changing global context. The rethinking fifth actualization and public policy, and choosing the month of Rabiul Awwal and the year 2021 for this deliberation. To me, this selection signifies a three-dimensional approach for studying changing global context. Rabiul Awwal, as the month of the Prophet Muhammad's birth, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, signifies the historic dynamism of Islamic tradition. Prophet Muhammad, the last in the series of the prophets, marks the end of prophecy and completion of the history of divine revelation. Islam reminds the humankind their responsibility to function as God's caliphs on earth. The Quran is the guidance for everyone, Hudal Linnas, signifying the mission of the Prophet Muhammad as grace for all the worlds, Rahmatul lil Alamin. Muslims are designated as Ummah Wasata because they are situated between the ancient and the modern world, as well as because they stand witness to change and continuity in the human history. They are the middle community with the task of inviting the worlds to common good. They are moderate community because they believe in the previous scriptures, honor common good, and celebrate freedom and diversity, and invite the followers of all faiths to join the common cause. Rabiul Awwal, as the first dimension of the present deliberation, signifies also the event of Hijrah, or migration, when Muslims migrated from Mecca to Medina. Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, arrived in Medina on 8th of Rabiul Awwal. Muslim community marked this event of Hijrah, signifying movement and migration as the starting point of Islamic calendar. The 21st century is the second dimension of changing global context. The new wave of globalism arising in this century is urging humanity for collective deliberation on the past experience to actualize human future. While academic theories in the 19th and 20th centuries focused on conflict and clashes, the 21st century is shifting the focus to the networking and cooperation between nations and towards the inclusive globalization instead of hierarchical and hegemonic governance by nation states. Focus on local context recognizes the significance of diversity as the third dimension of the changing global context. It stresses the role of human societies in sharing and charting inclusive policies of state and government to achieve the goal of equality, justice, and freedom in society. The Quran signifies the role of individuals in social change, saying God does not change the condition of a people until they change their state of mind. Growing interest in developing Islamic studies as a scientific discipline in the universities, contemporary academic research underlines the relevance of improving standards of education for better understanding of local context. Contemporary research in teaching of Islamic studies identifies at least 6 local contexts. First is ASEAN, then European, and then Southeast Asian, and then South Asian and United States and Muslim legal countries. This includes also the Jewish civilization. I find Southeast Asian context greater in focus and Indonesian context more so because it's more open. In fact, the term re-actualization of fiqh gained more academic prominence in Indonesia than elsewhere. This term reminds me of the remarkable two-volume work Min Nasser al by Sheikh Hassan Hanfi, God have mercy on him. I must, however, admit that I am not competent to speak on Southeast Asia, but I would like to take Indonesian context as a point of reference, simply because sometimes innocent questions by an ignorant outsider are helpful to open conversation on difficult topics. Reactualization means actualizing again. The term and the concept of reactualization of fiqh has particular reference to the prominent Indonesian intellectual and policymaker Nawar Shajari. God have mercy on him. His concept of reactualization reminiscence the Islamic historical perspective of change and continuity. This term seems intricately connected with the academic functions like tafsir, reinterpreting, tashkil, reconstructing, reviving, ihya, renewing, tajdeed, and ijtihad. I'm relying on the following four studies for my understanding of this term. Zofia Zamakhshari, Bahtiyar Asandi, Sipto Sambodo, and my friend Rahman. Zofia discussed Shazali in the framework of Muslim intellectual tradition and defines the term reactualization as a process of intellectualizing that is dynamic, recognizing social and political change, realistic, focusing on actual problems, and efficient, refreshed by new knowledge, indigenous by reinterpreting Islamic doctrine according to the Indonesian environment. According to Zofia, Nur Khalis Majid expanded this process to include understanding the Islamic tradition of ijtihad. Effendi defined the term in the local indigenous environment of the post-colonial Indonesian context. The colonial scholars and Muslims both found Islam and state difficult synthesis. In the beginning, the colonial scholars were divided on the authenticity of fiqh practice. The debate brought into focus the revival of traditional Shafi'i madhab as Puritan and authentic Islamic, but also with reference to the questions of codification and legislation by the state. After independence, the fiqh was politicized as an issue of reform in nation-state context. Some political parties that arose as political contenders for power, contesting the nationalist basis of state and nationalization of Islamic law in particular field. Political antagonism gave rise to three contending trends in 1970s: theological and religious renewal, political and social transformation, and new Islamic intellectualism. Shazali belonged to the third group, according to Effendi. All of these trends were modern. Reactualization accordingly sought synthesis between these contending trends and addressed the gap between the nationalist and the political. Political Islam defines belief in Islam as complete and comprehensive political system. New Muslim intellectuals sought a flexible and adaptive theological framework for the rejuvenation of religious understanding and re-actualization. Sambodo describes Shazali as a progressive Muslim thinker who sought harmony between Islam and state. To Sambodo, shifting paradigm was not the major issue in politics of Islamic law, the claim of transcendence and comprehensiveness of Islam was not contested, but it created an impasse. Shazali pleaded for focus on actual issues arising from the new context and called for re-actualization of it, codifying by reformulating traditional jurisprudence of faith, which was shaped by individual jurisprudence of the jurists and not by the faith, would not succeed as state law. It required legislation in the modern sense. It needed to be developed through courts and state legislation. To sum up this issue, re-actualization in Shazali's writing refers to the following range of meaning. First, to modify and to contextualize certain precepts and practices in accordance with the universal values of justice. Second, to exercise contextual interpretation instead of neutral understanding of the world. Third, to interpret with reference to the doctrine of Nasser in the Quranic study. The doctrine defines it as abandoning one of the Quranic texts when it is in conflict with another clear text. Reactualization means a departure from a text when it comes into conflict with the need of time in a certain context. Sambodo comments that this type of interpretation made Shazali controversial. Number 4, to interpret reactualization of Shirkiyat with reference to the doctrine of Masood. Number 5, dynamic interpretation to preserve the universal validity of Islamic teachings in the fast-changing world. Sambodo finds this meaning related to Ishtihad. Shazali, number 6, Shazali distinguished the 1991 Indonesian compilation of Islamic law from the classical faith. The latter compilation by individual jurists limited in scope to personal law. Number 7, he rejected the claim that Islam contained solutions to all problems and that Islamic law did not allow any change or modification. That is the point which Mujibur Rahman. Shazali argued that Indonesia was not the only country focusing on actual problems. The local context here is similar to several other Muslim countries which have adopted fiqh to the local needs. Indonesia must also do the same. The above analysis of the third dimension, namely the diversity in the Indonesian context and other Muslim world countries, requires constantly interacting with other two dimensions, that is, dynamism of Islam and the wave of globalization. The reason is that now these three dimensions have been interacting with each other in the classical and the medieval period as well. This short paper does not allow going into details, but a brief overview of debates on developing Islamic studies as a discipline refers continuity to the following themes: revelation and reason, and law and theology in the context of change and continuity. One of the important debates in early Islamic history related to the question, what was the source of knowledge, divine revelation or human reason? The query emerged in the 7th century from a real question about arbitration between two groups of Muslims. Could the Quran as a revelation function as arbiter, hakam, in a political dispute? Majority of Muslims agreed with appointing a human arbiter. They reframed the question in legal terms: was the Quran source of authority or the source of knowledge? In the 10th century, the same question became theological. and legal customs. Was it possible to know good and evil prior to revelation? The rationalist Mu'tazila argued that good and bad are knowable by human reason as well as by revelation. The Asharis held that they were known only by revelation through the Prophet. Consequently, the primacy of revelation became the majority view. This debate led to a clear division of Islamic sciences into the two categories of naqli, traditional, and aqli, whose source of reason is human. Al-Ghazali defined theology, ilm al-kalam, as the foundation for all Islamic sciences. He rejected pure rational sciences and because they bordered upon distrustful presumptions and futile. He wrote two books on philosophers, Maqasid al-Philosopher, describing their doctrine, and Tahafut al-Philosopher, incoherence in their theses. He added logical principles discussing had and burhan, definition and proof, and the principles of theology as epistemology, me'yar al-ilm, to the science of Islamic jurisprudence, that is, usul al-fiqh. Muslim theology, therefore, became heavily indebted to logic and metaphysics on one side and to theology on the other. Ibn Rushd wrote Tahafut al-Philosopher, incoherence of Ghazali's thesis, and wrote Fasl al-Maqal, a definitive statement to determine the relationship between revelation, Sharia, and reason, hikmah. Etienne Gilson refers to similar theological debate in Europe and Middle Ages between theologians and the rationalists. Theologians believe in the self-sufficiency of Christian revelation. Saint Augustine, like Al-Ghazali, considered that the safest way to reach truth was going to reason after believing in the revelation. Unless we believe, we cannot understand. Some Christian theologians held that metaphysics also provided proofs of God's existence. God is that than which nothing greater can be conceived. Ibn Rushd's influence, remembered as Averroism, also found followers among Christian theologians in Europe. They are called Latin Averroists, Thomas Aquinas, and many others among Jewish theologians like Maimonides spoke on harmony between revelation and reason. Aquinas' theology facilitated the shift to natural theology in European Enlightenment in the 18th century. The scientific movement and the religious debates after Reformation led Christian pilgrimage from religious conflict to harmony between revelation and natural philosophy. Revelation and reason debate in Middle Ages in Europe turned to natural philosophy and theology. In that period, the Enlightenment scholars frequently referred to Islamic history, especially to the Muslim interest in these sciences and in the Abbasid period and religious tolerance in Muslim Spain. Several Arabic manuscripts on the history of Spain were edited and translated in European languages for Muslim world in the 19th and 20th century. It is important to note that according to John Wall, the beginnings of the modern Islamic experience are in 18th century. The significant factor were the revivalist movements like the Wahhabi movement in Arabian Peninsula, Fulani movement in Nigeria, Shah Waliullah in India, Nuruddin al-Raniri in Indonesia, and throughout the Muslim world, they rejected or reoriented the encompassing criticism of Wahdatul Wujud based on metaphysical theology to stress the doctrine of tajdeed or renewal of religious thought and practice. Modernity came to the Muslim world in the wake of European colonialism and transformed these reform and revival movements into resistance groups against European imperialism and eventually into fundamentalism and political Islam or Islamic statism. The movement for modernization, like Sir Sayyid in India, that focused on education in modern sciences and particularly on new theology as theory of knowledge, came to be known later as Islamic modernism. Among them, Muhammad Iqbal's reconstruction of religious thought in Islam and Fazlur Rahman's Islamic methodology in history developed the idea of new theology, moving the debate from theology to law. Speaking on the modernity of Islam, Iqbal referred to the significance of the end of prophecy as a movement towards human reason. The Prophet of Islam seems to stand between the ancient and the modern world. As far as the source of revelation is concerned, it belongs to the ancient world, and as far as the spirit of revelation is concerned, it was belonged to the modern world. In Islam, prophecy reached its perfection and end. No more prophets means that man is thrown back on its own resources. Finality of revelation means the abolition of priesthood and hereditary kingship in Islam. The constant appeal to reason and experience in the Quran and emphasis on nature and history as source of knowledge. Iqbal was responding to similar ongoing debate on change and continuity, mechanism and dynamism, tradition and modernity, science and religion, and pan-Islamic caliphate to nation state. He clarified that as a dynamic religion, Islam could respond to all the challenges and contrary to the negative predictions, it continues today, it continues today to be part of the global community. Reference to law of nature in Sir Sayyid's lecture echoed the ideas of natural law and natural theology in the Enlightenment period in Europe. The idea of nature offered alternate concepts of law and theology that were not supernatural and metaphysical. Sir Sayyid's call for new theology tests scientific knowledge. His political opponents and conservative ulama disagreed. Activist Muslim leaders like Jamaluddin Afghani accused that Sir Sayyid was betraying Muslims and supporting the British government. Sir Sayyid's call for new theology was viewed as continuous with debate between the Mu'tazila and the Ashari in the Abbasid period. Afghani issued a fatwa declaring Sir Sayyid a heretic and nature worshipper. Mufti Muhammad Abdul translated Afghani's fatwa into Arabic with the title of Refutation of the Heretic. This fatwa influenced public opinion in the Arab world and also in other parts of the world. Even though a number of scholars in Turkey, Iran, and Egypt wrote on the need of new theology, the fatwa of Afghani and Abdul turned the debate politically against Sir Sayyid. Sir Sayyid's companion Ibn Naumani wrote a book on Ilm al-Kalam arguing that Islam required no new theology to defend itself. The old theology was sufficient. Muhammad Iqbal and Fazlur Rahman and others like Wahiduddin in India continued developing new theology. The political situation in the Muslim world changed rapidly in favor of political Islam from 1979 onwards, after Islamic revolution in Iran and Islamization laws in Pakistan, Nigeria, Sudan, and Malaysia. A powerful movement for Islamization knowledge arose in 1979 and continued until 2000, organizing conferences in Pakistan, Western countries, the Arab world, International Institute of Islamic Thought in 1995.
Yeah. Your voice is not clear enough. Yeah. Please try again.
I'm, can you?
Yeah. Now it's okay.
It's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. You can continue. Yeah.
A powerful movement for Islamization of knowledge arose in 1979 and continued until 2000. It organized conferences in Pakistan, Western countries, and in the Arab world. Conducted research, produced literature on ideology, pedagogy, methodology, curriculum, and textbooks in almost all fields of Islamic studies. Its success was more visible in Islamic economics, Islamic ethics, education, and business. As a scientific knowledge movement, it failed due to emphasis on ideological politics and political theology. Fazlur Rahman offered a critique of the movement for Islamization knowledge in 1988. He called for re-examination of the Islamic tradition that, according to him, shaped mind, not propositions of or theories about knowledge.
Oh, your voice is lost again. Hello?
And the
Professor?
theory
Yeah.
that modern the Islamization movement is based on the theory
Yeah.
that modern world has been developed and
Yeah. Hello, Professor. Your voice is lost again.
Islamic. In fact, to look up this problem.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Now it's okay. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Let me.
Yeah, yeah.
The Islamization movement was based on the theory that modern world has been developed and constructed upon knowledge which cannot be considered Islamic. In fact, no knowledge is inherently Islamic. It's the misuse of that knowledge which makes it un-Islamic. Based on this analysis, Fazlur Rahman concluded that the movement
It's okay. You can go on. Yeah. Just go on. Yeah. Please try again. Hello? Yeah. Let's try again. Yeah. maybe we have a technical problems. You should unmute maybe your computer, your voice. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now it's okay.
Yeah. Okay. I'll begin it.
Yeah.
How does a discipline train a student to live up to the standards of knowledge? Richard Martin and Muhammad Arkoon have analyzed the history of teaching Islamic studies in the Western universities, and found that this moral responsibility has been defined variably, and Martin traces this development of Islamic studies as a discipline from three perspectives. One perspective was to study Islam as a religion in divinity schools. Obviously, it took Islam a long time to be part of the religious studies and took some more time to be decided whether it would be studied as a religion, comparatively, phenomenologically, or historically. The second perspective was the literary tradition. For a long time, it remained part of Oriental studies. Even there, it was divided into departments of several different Oriental languages. The second perspective was foreign affairs, divided into areas, and hence came to be called area studies. Its disciplinary approach was defined accordingly. It was studying Islam from different disciplinary approaches depending on the department. Martin concluded that it was only at the end of 20th century, in light of recent critiques and failure of both Orientalism and area studies, that academics began calling for placing Islamic studies within disciplinary framework of modern university. But the idea of a modern university is still in evolving, and its own construction of scholarly knowledge, governed by the discipline, is still in the midst. Martin suggests Marshall Hodgson's book, The Venture of Islam, as a model for studying Islam comparatively in world history. According to Arkoon, the problem is that Islamic study is not a scientific term referring to specific discipline. Even Hodgson was not comfortable with Islamic as an objective for scientific studies. He preferred to coin a new term, Islamicate. This problematization has its origin in the essentialization of Islam in terms of theology and authenticity. It goes back to the classification of knowledge from religious or moral, or more specifically, from the theological perspective. We have mentioned above Al-Ghazali's view that theology is the foundation discipline for all science. We have also referred to the conservative Muslims rejecting the call for new theology. It looks as if theology was seen as a tool of defending beliefs, not as a discipline to produce the and explore knowledge. To sum up, it is important to note that Al-Ghazali's idea of theology as a foundation knowledge was crucial in defining the discipline of fiqh, or more accurately, the usul al-fiqh. Ibn Khaldun was first to notice this development. In his analysis, the development of sciences, Ibn Khaldun distinguished between sciences, ulum, and arts, sanai, that are skills without scientific discipline. He also distinguished the development of fiqh and usul al-fiqh. According to him, fiqh was the knowledge of the laws of God. Specialists in this knowledge were the readers in the beginning, readers of the Quran. who had memorized the Quran, knew in detail about the abrogated, decisive, and allegorical verses. When fiqh developed into a science, they came to be called fuqaha, the jurists. As a science, fiqh developed two schools. One was the Iraqi school that used the method of reasoning and deductive analogy, and the other was Hijazi school of Hadith. Usul al-Fiqh was the science of the sources of God's law. It developed into two methods. The Hanafi school or the Hanafi method focused on actual case law, proof, and developed rules and regulations. They employed analogical reasoning within the rules developed by the school. The other school of methodology employed the method of reasoning developed by theology. Ibn Khaldun observes that in later periods, the Hanafi jurists developed synthesis of both methods. Ibn Khaldun does not include Abu Ishaq al-Shatibi, who wrote Al-Muwafaqat, improving upon the Maliki and Hanafi methodology of istislah and istihsan. He called it Maqasid al-Sharia, based on inductive rather than deductive method of analysis of the sources. He found that maslaha was main objective of Sharia. Maslaha consisted of 5 objections which Sharia aimed to protect. However, he developed the entire philosophy of law on this basis and divided between legal and theological approaches that was making the jurisprudence controversial. Shatibi's approach was criticized and unregulated as unregulated legal reasoning and not based. The short space in this paper does not allow going into details. The theological approach to fiqh dismisses the Maliki method of istisla and Masale Mursala and the Hanafi method of istihsan as inauthentic because they are not based on certain definite text, nas. Similarly, they do not recognize the inductive method authentic because it is inconclusive. They consider syllogistic analysis of a definitive text authentic. The second objection is that the consideration of maslaha makes the legitimacy of legal reasoning arbitrary. Hussain Ahmed Khan, a well-known Egyptian authority on usul al-fiqh, wrote a small treatise on the question of legitimacy and authority of Islamic State. And he developed his argument on the following premises. Firstly, the purpose of Islam is to prevail over all false religions. Number 2, Allah promised to cause the Ummah to accede to power on earth to establish Islam. Number 3, the Islamic Ummah is given the responsibility to conduct the message of Tawheed, enjoining good and forbidding evil. Number 4, in Islamic constitutional law, the meaning of the principles of legitimacy is the working of the state. The working of state, its overall dominion in decisions and its dispositions must take place in accordance with Sharia. This principle is expressed by the term supremacy of Sharia in Constitution. Number 5, the ultimate legislative authority belongs to Allah. Number 6, the Prophet's function is to convey and explain that law. Number 7, the function of the legal scholar is to derive the rule from the Sharia sources in accordance with established rules of ijtihad. After clarifying these basic premises, he concludes as follows, which is interesting. When the mujtahideen exercise their ijtihad and their points of view agree concerning the interpretation of a text and derivation from it, then their agreement will become ijma, and the meaning of the text will progress from presumption to preemptory, that is final. Therefore, the laws so derived will also have the same legal authority as those derived from us or text. This is for this reason and on the objective of the lawgiver in regard to it, cancels out all other interpretations so that the text becomes as one denoting a single meaning and with all and which will allow no other meaning. On this basis, therefore, one who denies the meaning of such an agreed view is a kafir, while one who contravenes it will be a sinner and wrongdoer. I need not comment on this aspect. It is an example of a theological approach that views legal authority in terms of divine authority. It will be helpful to refer here to Ibn Rushd's analysis of chaos. Ibn Rushd argues that the juridical inference are nothing more than zan, presumptive opinion. It does not allow faith to be counted as understanding. In contrast to syllogism, the qiyas does not have the power to deduce the unknown from the known. Instead of qiyas, Ibn Rushd focuses on the semantic and linguistic origin of the judicial views. Nowadays, we're talking about hermeneutics and semantics. Ibn Rushd finds the Hanafi method more authentic. He recommends focusing on the qawaid, the rules and principles in a juridical statement, rather than focusing on differences and contradictions in interpretation of the jurist. A researcher must focus on the principles, the rules, and causes to which that particular jurist refers in his reason. In my view, the following are the key issues of the above discussion that require further analysis of curriculum in re-actualization. Number one, historically, Islamic law developed as a non-state jurist law, not legislated by the state. It does not mean that it was not applied in courts and sanctioned by the rulers, but an unclear division between Sharia and Siyasa allowed Siyasa to function as a doctrine of rulers' privilege. The second point of interest that needs to be explored, political theory developed as an authoritative and absolute governance, ahkam al-sultaniyya. Sharia being religious, fiqh was also claimed to be complete and immutable. The role of ijtihad was only contingent and limited. The idea of public policy was not society-oriented in terms of normativity. Political theory To conclude, in order to make deliberation on the collective experience meaningful, it is necessary to combine the three dimensions discussed above. The changing global context in the Muslim world was studied in Europe as Western impact on Islamic thought and its methodology. However, Islamic studies as a discipline, often called Orientalism, continuously shifted its focus from the change in a global context. Muslim responses also differed according to their negative or positive perception of the Western. Muslim intellectuals who considered the change as historical global phenomena and called for re-actualization were misunderstood by their opponents. Muslims considered them westernized, and the Western scholars found them apologetic. In fact, re-actualization approach was critical of both Western and traditional constructs of law and governance, and stressed on For instance, interactive local global context. Lack of this perspective not only polarized Muslim societies, but also allowed the growth of extremism that provided justification for conflict areas. There is a need for open and critical discussion of differences of opinion that also provides the objective to these debates towards consensus. I will end here. Thank you very much, and sorry
Thank
for
you.
interruption during the presentation.
Thank you very much, Professor Khalid Masood. It was a wonderful presentation. He discussed important issues in Islamic law in the context of present changing world. And he referred to the classical Muslim scholars' ideas like Al-Ghazali, Ibn Rushd, Shatibi, Ibn Khaldun, and so on. But he also refers to Muhammad Iqbal and Fazlur Rahman, discussing the two important questions like revelation and reason in Islam and how law and theology are connected. And by the end of his presentation, he said in his paper, I think I have to reread this statement. It is very important. There is a need for open and critical discussions of different opinions, but also provides the objective to these debates toward consensus. I think this is very strong statement from Professor Khalid Masood. Oh, thank you. And now we move on to the second keynote speaker. His name is Muhammad Abdul Nasir. He was born in Nganjuk, Java in 1975. So he is very young, I think, and a junior to me. He studied at the State Institute of Islamic Studies Wali Songo, Semarang, and then he continues his study at Leiden University, Islamic Studies, for a master degree. And then he also continued his study in the United States at the Emory University Atlanta and finished in 2007. His PhD thesis was about Islamic family law, in Indonesia. And today, Muhammad Abdul Nasir is also a director of the postgraduate program, vice director of the postgraduate program at the Mataram State Islamic University. Now he is going to present his paper entitled Reactualizing Fiqh in a Global Changing Context, Islamic Law's Contribution to Public Policy. Now, welcome Professor Muhammad Abdul Nasir. Time is yours.
Thank you, Professor Mujibur Rahman, Director of UIN Antasari Banjarmasin, also my senior and member of the steering committee of Aicis. Bismillah, Alhamdulillah, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. First of all, I would like to thank to the committee of this prestigious annual conference for giving me a chance to share my latest research and also thought about the very important issue that is about the fiqh. Well, may I be allowed to share my PowerPoint presentation? So, it's still disabled. Or I just read my PowerPoint presentation if I cannot share it through the screen. Okay, let's try, yes. Yes, okay, well, thank you Professor Khalid Masood for your very philosophical an analytical thought on the concept and relation between fiqh and ulama, classical jurists, and also contemporary Muslim jurists and scholar, mostly from South ASEAN, who are engaged in the discussion about the Islamic law and Sharia and how it should be applied in the global context like now. My own topic is not far different, I think, from your presentation, but I would like to focus on the recent phenomena and based on the empirical evidence about this issue. So the title is, as Professor Mujibur Rahman said, Reactualizing fiqh in a global changing context, Islamic law's contribution to public policy, as this is also the grand theme of this year's annual conference. So I would like to divide my presentation into two parts. The first part will be discussing the issue of actualization, reactualization and reform of fiqh. And in the last part, I will focus my presentation on the Indonesian context, because I would like to draw this thought into more contextual location or contextual place. So we have a concrete thought about how the Islamic law will give a contribution to the public policy. Now, we are now in the changing global context. It is the time where human being discover science and technology, and it had spread the information using digital platform. All this, of course, has a huge impact on the people's life, including in their perception of the religious practice and law. Changing global context also faced with the critical issue that come up with it, like the democracy, human rights, multiculturalism, pluralism, climate change, gender justice, a free market. Things like this have not been faced by fiqh in the classical or in the medieval period. Also, we witnessing now the global political and economical disruption marked by the rise of terrorism and the spread of the COVID-19. All this mark the world we are living now, and in a disruptive and changing context that influence religiosity, including influence, of course, the fiqh as the main topic of our discussion. Now, in this changing global context, there are many challenges that fiqh is now facing. First, the corpus of fiqh is still based on the classical doctrine, but it is now still used and referred in postmodern digital and disruption era. So there is like a gap between the theory of fiqh, which was created or formulated in the classical and medieval period, and the application of it in this era, digital era, disruption era, and postmodern era. And the other problem that the fiqh faces is relating to methodology and epistemology. Most fiqh still use textual basis hermeneutic and also use atomistic or partial approaches, and use mostly deductive and monolithic approaches. Also, some concept of fiqh face strict challenge, like the concept of ummah, the unification of Muslim society throughout the world, and versus now the idea of universal value, which is stipulated by the United Nations. Also, the context of the post-colonialism, like the rise of the nation state and the changing concept of citizen. In the traditional fiqh, of course, it refers usually to concept of a sultania or Islamic caliphate, and the citizenship is based on mostly religion, but now citizenship based on the geographical bind or geographical limit where people live in, not based on religion. While in the classical fiqh, religion is still determinant factor in deciding the citizenship of a person. So it is a challenge, of course, of fiqh. Yeah, we see that the 4th century is beginning from the early period and the formation of school and Islamic jurisprudence or madhab up to the present. Fiqh remain one of the important resources of Muslim religious, social, economical, and political life. Although its current existence as an authoritative legal sources in Muslim society is being steadily challenged by the state law, international convention, and local tradition, but fiqh does not extinct. It even enjoys phenomenal development in certain fields such as economic and monetary system and halal tourism and industries. However, in the other field, fiqh encounter harsh criticism and rejection because its doctrine are seen incompatible with the values of modern life. Now I make a small, a simple chart to show you the development of fiqh from time to time, starting from the early period of the Prophet and the Companion, where the fiqh was not formed. And then following that period, we see the formation and the rise of school. And following that period is often called as the taqlid or blind imitation. And then the Muslim world encounter with European colonialism and the introduction of Western law in most colonized Muslim country or Muslim land, substituting fiqh with the Western law, or at least dividing law into different categories depending on the subject. For example, in Indonesia, prior to independence, there were a legal pluralism depending on the personality of the citizen. For European, applied European law. For the Muslim, they adhere to fiqh. And for the adat or tribe, they follow the adat law, and so on and so forth. So following the end of the colonialism, we see the reform of Islamic law, asking some revision and revisiting to the basic principle of fiqh and its application, because some of them are being challenged, and also the rise of reorganization of legal system. And now, where the fiqh will go, I will now see some offering and the rising of Islamic ideologies who ascribe to different aspirations of Islamic law. At least from many references that I am reading, there are at least 4 categories of Islamic ideology, each with their own idea of Islamic law: Islamists, Puritans, modernist reformists, and traditionalists. The Puritan emphasize the return to the most authoritative sources, namely the Quran and the Hadith or Sunnah, and the Islamists propose the total application of Sharia law and restoration of Caliphate and Islamic State. Meanwhile, the modernist reformists adopt the moral ideal of Islam to promote Islamic law reform, while the other, that is traditionalists, maintain and defend the traditional fiqh as it developed by the founding father of jurists and their students in the classical and medieval eras. So these are the 4 division of discourses of Islamic law in contemporary world. Whichever ideology and their offering of Islamic law, we nearly, like or not, we still need to reactualize fiqh or to reform fiqh. And there are some argument for this effort. First, we see that the nature of fiqh Fiqh is the interpretation or the result of Muslim Jewish understanding to the Quran or to the Sharia law. So it's a relative, it's a local, it is a plural, and it is contextual. And there is also almost no issue which has a monolithic or single prescription or stipulation in fiqh. And in a school adopt a different method and approach to fiqh, different methodology of Islamic law or usul fiqh, as Professor Khalid has already discussed earlier. There is also challenge to fiqh that differ greatly from one state or society to another. And we also have 5 legal categories that show the flexibility of fiqh, which include the wajib or mandatory, and then mandub or sunnah recommended, and then mubah or neutral, and makruh or reprehensible, and haram. It is unlike the other law, which may only divide it into right or wrong, black or white. Fiqh is very flexible from if we look at these 5 categories. So the hukum or the legal status of thing can be easily changing depending on the ilat or the reason of the law, and also depending on where the law apply. So in one time, maybe the law of the thing is mandatory or wajib, but in other occasion it can be a makruh or sunnah. So this is, I think, the basic argument that is needed to revisit fiqh and to make it more relevant to our contemporary life. So what is now the domains and issues of reactualization? I think there are 4 or 5 domains that we need to think when we discuss about the reactualization or reform of Islamic law. First, about the content. Which part of fiqh that need to be reactualized or reformed? And the method, what is the suitable method and approach to fiqh? And also the context, which society or which country that fiqh apply, and what are their political and legal system. All these need to be considered when we want to reactualize fiqh. And also we're talking about the strategy. Do we need legislation to make the Islamic code as a state law? Or we want to fiqh as a social norm, or combination of both? And then who will execute this? Who are entitled to make reactualization? Now we go to the content, which part of fiqh needs to be reactualized. I notice at least 4 main fields which are in need of fundamental reform or reactualization to make it more relevant to our contemporary life. This is women's status and gender, and the minority, the issue of the corporal punishment, and the freedom of religion. This topic has also been discussed and mentioned by our Minister of Religion in his opening speech. So there are 4 issues that usually fiqh has a problem. For example, how Islamic law treat the minority, and what is how free is the freedom of religion in the Muslim state or in the doctrine of fiqh, and also whether the corporal punishment, which form the one of the important element of fiqh, like hudud, like the jarima and other corporal punishment. It is questionable of the application of this law in the contemporary world, and also the problem of women's status and gender. So what is the method when we reactually fix? There are some things that I would like to underline. First, we use the ethical or universal value of the Quran and the Sunnah as the eternal value, as the eternal spirit, which don't change over time. It is like the idea of Islam, solihun likuli zamanin wa makanin. I think is refer to the basic and the universal value of the Quran and Sunnah. Also, we need the usul fiqh, which is combined and supported by any relevant science. For example, medical, biological, and other things. So we cannot make ijtihad purely based on the traditional usul fiqh. Like when we dealing with the COVID-19, we need a medical expert, we need the economic scholar, and many other stakeholders who all are concerned with the impact of the COVID. So fiqh alone is not enough. So therefore, usul fiqh need to be broadened, need to be reordered by including any relevant social and science. And also, when we're talking about the fiqh, I think we need also to think it in a comparative, in a collective and a combinative. No more single mazhab that should be adopted. We may combine different opinion to produce new opinion, which may cover the many follower of the mazhab. And also we refer to the highest objective of Islamic law or maqasid syariah as the main principle of the reform. And in terms of the technicality of doing reform and reactualization, I think the Muslim scholar has already offered their view on the concept of the istihad maqasidi, istihad based on the maqasid, or istihad istislahi, and also istihad qiyasi and jama'i, or a communal consensus among Muslims. Also, we cannot reject or escape from the international convention like human rights, environmental protection, natural and rare resources. Fiqh also must be deal with this issue as well. Now, what is the context of the reactualization? I mean, the reactualization of fiqh also depend on the context where fiqh exists. At least there are 3 different contexts where fiqh now operating in Muslim life. First in Islamic countries, and second is Muslim majority countries, and the third in Muslim minority or secular countries. All these will need different approach and strategy of the reactualization. In the Islamic country, we see that Islam as the state ideology and its official religion, Islamic law as state law, and the domination of the classical faith, and the greater rule of the ulama or clergy. So the reactualization will face stiff resistance, I think, from the classical or the conservative ulama. So that's the main issue that many Muslim countries, Islamic countries now is facing. In the Muslim country, the issue is a little bit different because Muslim country like Indonesia is neither secular or neither Islamic state, neither secular nor Islamic state, but it's a mixed law, religious law, and also secular code and also religious code. And the actor here is the state and also ulama. So there is a much broader rule of state and ulama in the Muslim country. While in the third category of the context of Islamic law application is a non-Muslim country. Of course, the problem and challenge is much greater and complicated for Muslim when they live in the under non-Muslim country. As Professor Mujibur Rahman say, they need a different kind of fiqh. It's called fiqh al-aqaliyat, or fiqh minority. And the integration or the accommodation of Islamic law into state law is the opportunity is very tiny. Yeah. Next, now, what is the strategy when we want to talk about the reactualization of fiqh? Do we need fiqh as the social guide or social ethic guiding Muslim in living in daily life as a living law, or we want to legislate fiqh as a state law, or the combination of both? I think in the context of Muslim majority country, they use combination, but in the some other countries, mostly in the secular or Western country, perhaps fiqh play role as a living law more than as a state law. These are the agents that need to collaborate, not to work one in one or in a separate job, because they may cause, the conflict or competition in defining what Islamic law is and how Islamic law should be applied. Ulama, of course, has their own standard of Islamic law. State also same, but also states also may use Islamic law as the social engineering controlling Muslim society. We also have a judge and also lay Muslim who are concerned with the law in their daily life. And the role of the madrasa is also important because it's the place where the Muslim scholar and ulama are born and produced. But also we need the Islamic University and Research Center to develop both the theoretical approach and also their research on the Islamic law. Now, I would like to turn your attention into the reactualization of fiqh Indonesian case. I would like to talk in a more concrete than the previous one because previous one is more like more theoretical and abstract. Now, of course, the Minister of Religious Affairs said in his speech that reactualization is not the first, it's not the new issue. We know in Indonesia there are a number of Muslim scholars who propose some provocative and progressive idea how to deal with the fiqh. For example, the former Minister of Religious Affairs, Munawir Sazali, proposed the idea of reactualization of Islamic law. I think this idea is based on the fact that the division of inheritance still give a greater portion to male to the male family, relative, rather than to the female. But Munawir Sazali see that division for the proportional portion will be more justice. And then also the idea of using zakat or tax as the one that can reduce the Muslim obligation. For example, when Muslim pays tax, then the total amount of zakat should be reduced to the amount of the tax that they already paid. Also, the former President Abdurrahman Wahid issued an idea of indigenization of Islam because she said that Islam is like in the sky, it's not going to the earth. There is a gap between the Islam and local tradition and so on and so forth. So Islam cannot approach indigenous people because of the gap that exists between them. So that's why we need to bring Islam go down and integrate it to the local culture or into a national condition. Another idea was brought by Professor Hazairin, Professor of Law from the University of Indonesia, with the idea of national mazhab, similar to idea brought by the Professor Hasbi As-Siddiqui on the Indonesian fiqh. The other idea about the reactualization of fiqh come from the ulama, from the traditionalist background, Haji Sahal Mahfud, and also Professor Muhammad Ali Yafi, who proposed the fiqh as a social norm, not as the state law. And the last, we also see the effort to reinterpret the Islamic family code, namely compilation of Islamic law, and replace it with counter-legal draft of compilation of Islamic law proposed by Ibu Musdah Mulia and the team of gender mainstreaming in the Ministry of Religious Affairs, although this draft was cancelled due to strong opposition from the traditional Muslim background. Now, what we need to think when we talk about the reactualization of fiqh? Here, I would like to propose my idea, Sharia as a critique. I think the problem of Islamic law in Indonesia here is, first, when we see in the daily life, we see still many deviation and transgression of Islamic law on daily life. We also see that the Muslim mind, when they're talking about the Islamic law, they tend to think about the legislation as if the highest priority of the Islamic development is legislation. I think I would like to critique both the tendencies. And also the lacking interest in the field out of the traditional domain of fiqh, like the issue of labor, human rights, environment issue, and gender, because these are traditionally not discussed greatly in the fiqh. So Muslim less give less attention to this issue. So Sharia as a critic means the perspective that places Sharia not only as the norm of Islamic law, as is usually understood, but also as a critique of the understanding and practice of Islamic law itself. As a norm, Sharia is a normative provision of Islamic law formulated by Muslim jurist fuqaha as a guide for worship or ibadah and also for social interaction or muamalah. As a critique, Sharia serves as an analytical tool to criticize the understanding, practice, and political orientation of Islamic law so that it is in line with the normative and objective of Islamic law itself. Sharia as a critic refers to the tradition of Islah and criticism of the implementation of Islamic law after the prophetic era until the formation of the school of law. So the contextualization of Sharia as criticism in the current era refers to the methodology and actualization by considering the values and fundamental principles of Sharia, such as maslah and maqasid Sharia, for general legal project and social welfare, humanity and nationality. So, Sharia as a critic is a critic to daily practice in the domain of Islamic law, that still see many transgression and deviation. Islamic familial practice, we still see like practice of divorce beyond the court and the neglected divorce of a wife and children, for example, because the divorce take place out of court, which is still sanctioned by Islamic law. This is kind of practice that need to be criticized and need to be put into the correct way. And also in terms of Islamic transaction or muamalah, we still also see many practice which does not reflect the principle of muamalah, like doing business on the basis of mutual respect, basis on trust, basis on the absence of zulm, or the absence of domination from those who have a capital and those who as the worker of a worker. And in terms of Islamic economic, we also see the use of Sharia as a brand, but in practice, the brand itself or of the business itself does not necessarily reflect the Sharia idea. I find, because this is like an emerging brand, everything must be Shariatized, but in fact, it may be not Sharia at all. So this is like the hijacking the Sharia mostly for the economical gain. And also I would like to use the Sharia as a critique to the Islamic legislation. Why people or Muslims still envision legislation or the Shariatization? Why? Because I think it's enough. We more than enough Islamic code in our country, starting from the issue of the administrative and also substantial legislation. For example, law on Islamic judicature, and then zakat law, pilgrimage law, Sharia banking law, compilation of Islamic law in the Ahwalus Shashiyah, and also compilation of Sharia economic law, and also the application of partial hudud law in Aceh and the halal law. I think when we consider this Islamic code, it is perhaps not an exaggeration if we say that Indonesia is very much Islamic country because most of the Sharia or fiqh has already been integrated into state law. So what else? I think it is enough. So when people say that we need to apply Sharia in Islam in Indonesia, then these people maybe don't know the history of the Islamic legislation. We have a lot more than what they think perhaps about the Sharia in the context of state law. Now, I would also see the portrait of Islamic Indonesia is really complete. We have a fiqh as the basis of social norm of daily life. We also have a fatwa, social norm, the actual legal, but also have a larger political implication. We have a state code decree, which is legally binding to the disputant. We also have Islamic code or kanun, legally binding to the citizen. So it is already completed. So what's now the contribution of fiqh for the national legal reform and public policy? I think we should go back to the two basic principles of Islamic law, that is maslahah and maqasid, as the universal value. So far, the political aspiration of Islamic law are only concerned with conventional Islamic law legislation, like such as the worship, muamalah, iqtisadi, ahwal syasiyah, and do not or have not touched a broad and strategic contemporary field. The principle of maslahah and maqasid sharia are very likely to be legislated in the legal product regarding environmental maintenance, health problem, clean government, human rights and gender and labor, as well as other important contemporary issues. Inclusive sharia, and I use here inclusive and exclusive sharia, sorry. So the humanity, public interest, public goods, nationalism, are all common interests that every citizen can fight for them regardless of their religion, ethnicity, and cultural background. I mean, Sharia can also play important role in defining, in contributing the idea of humanism, public interest, and nationalism, using the principle of maslahah to propose any constructive critique to any legislation that does not have give benefit to the citizen. Lastly, in fact, epistemically, legislation on the principle of maslahah and maqasid sharia has a greater opportunity than conventional sharia normative legislation or classical fiqh in the context of an Indonesian state. If conventional sharia is exclusive, generally it only applies to Muslim, then contemporary issues of humanity and nationality are inclusive because they are shared concern. So, in the very last statement I would like to make here is that the influencing public morality and the piety among Muslims and shifting development from exclusive Sharia field that apply to Muslim to inclusive field that theory of maslahah where all citizens are concerned. So by this I mean that we don't have to think that the domain beyond the traditional fiqh is not fiqh, but still fiqh can contribute greatly using the principle of maslahah and also maqasid syariah. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam. It's very interesting, your idea of inclusive Sharia. Yeah, I think it is also mentioned by the Minister of Religious Affairs, just his speech, that it is not important to convert other followers of religion to Islam, but how the Islamic values are practiced by the people, even though by the people of different religion of Islam. And I think you have also presented a comprehensive analysis of the reactualization of Islamic law within 5 components: its content, method, context, strategy, and agent. I think this is a very, a comprehensive analysis of this issue. And maybe I want to add some things before closing our sessions, that 2 important actual issues right now, I think is the first is the climate change, the environmental issues. You also touch a little bit. And I think this is a very big issue that should be explored and discussed within the framework of Islamic law. And the second one, of course, the health issue after the coronavirus attack on the global world. I remember that Slavoj Zizek, in his book entitled Pandemic COVID-19 Shake the World, he said in the beginning of the book that we may not be able to come back to the old normal, but we should reconstruct our new normal based on the ruin of the old one. So this is, I think, a very interesting statement, and it could be correct. Yeah. So if it is the case, then we should reactualize Islamic law in accordance to this new situation. So because time is up, I think I have to thank our two keynote speakers, Professor Khalid Masood from Pakistan and Professor Muhammad Abdul Nasser from Mataram, Indonesia, who have already presented a very interesting papers and promote new ideas and critical thinking. And before closing these sessions, I would like to quote again the paper written by Professor Khalid Masood when he referred to Muhammad Iqbal. Yeah, Iqbal referred to the significance of the end of prophecy in Islam as a movement toward human reason. So, quote, the prophet of Islam seems to stand between the ancient and the modern world. As far as the source of revelation is concerned, he belongs to the ancient world. And as far as the spirit of his revelation is concerned, he belongs to the modern world. In Islam, prophecy reached its perfection and end. No more prophets means that man is thrown back on his own resources. Finality of revelation means the abolition of priesthood and hereditary kinship in Islam, the constant appeal to reason and experience in the Quran, and the emphasis on nature and history as sources of knowledge. I think this is a very wonderful quote from Muhammad Iqbal, which is paraphrased by Professor Khalid Masood. So thank you again, and I hope the conference will continue discussing different kind of issues, especially in the framework of rethinking fiqh and reactualization of fiqh in public policy in the global context. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.